Welcome! We have literally just segued from Aunt Annie's quilt right into Facebook. So we've just been scrambling to move the Aunt Annie's stuff off of our back display and uncover the beautiful display that Dawn has done for us for today and catch our breath and have a mouthful of tea. So we are good to go. And if you joined us yesterday, you kind of got a sneak preview of what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm actually going to pull my chair over so I'm at a better height for this camera. Something that I ran across, a little while ago. I ran across a word. It's called Boro, B-O-R-O. It comes from the Japanese, Boro Boro, and it basically refers to a technique that grew out of a necessity. Back in, hundreds of years ago, Japanese workers, Japanese peasants were wearing utilitarian garments, usually made of hemp fibers. They weren't decorative, and they would wear out, but they couldn't afford to replace them all the time. So they would take any scraps that they could find. Sometimes, if they were fortunate, they got scraps of other fibers, silks, wools, cottons, and they would hand stitch those, obviously, onto their garments to make them last longer. So human beings, being what they are, loving decoration, that quickly developed into a look, I guess you would say. And over the years, the patches would be layered on top of patches, layered on top of patches, until that garment had a life and a story of its own. And they were often passed on through the generations. So if you look this up online, it is just going exploding. So I went, I can do that. When I finish here, I like to hand stitch at home. So if you were around for Facebook yesterday, you saw my bag. This is my first attempt at Boro, and I made mine into a bag, which I think is a really manageable way to start with any sort of project, any sort of technique, because hey, it's a bag, you can use it. I'm using mine as a purse, but we've got lots of bag patterns. We've got books on making bags. So the Boro part is basically constructing the fabric. From that, you then get to carry on and make a bag. Now, you don't have to limit it to bags. You can use the technique on clothing. So I had Dawn put out some of the denims. Very often, traditionally, this was done with this denim-y kind of color. It's called indigo, because those dyes are what was available in those days. They're a natural dye, so that's what colors the clothing was. So very often you'll see this technique used on top of denim, and it just adds so much texture, so much depth to the denim. So we have denim out, and we have, if you're short, this is a scrap project. This uses your scraps. And if you go, I don't have scraps, we actually have scrap bags that you can pick up. Dawn makes these up. And we do have a price on this guy. So there's a whole bag of scraps for $10. She calls them stash starters. Like, who doesn't have a stash already? But so we have scrap bags, and although they're not the indigo denim-y colors, you don't have to limit yourself to the traditional Boro Boro colors, because hey, we can be different. So I'm just going to give you a really, really brief, I've been talking all afternoon, a really brief demonstration of how you get yourself started on this. I'll tell you a little story. You can see how nice. What I like about this bag is how soft and squashy it is. Now, this is quilted. This has layers to it. So it's sturdy without being stiff. So that's a really, really great little project. And I am just going to show you how to get started. So what I have here, you need a base fabric. And I'm just using, this is going to eventually be all covered, so you could use a scrap of pretty much anything. I have a piece of muslin here. It can be a printed fabric because it will be completely covered. And I am layering this. Now you can baste your scrap fabric onto your base fabric and then quilt it, but I'm going to do it all in one process. So I have my base fabric, which is the muslin, and I have a piece of quilt batting here. This happens to be an 80-20 blend, but you could use all kinds of quilt batting on this. Don't get anything too stiff or dense because you're going to be hand stitching and you want that needle to go through nicely. So we've got our base fabric, we've got our quilt bat, and we have more scraps. I actually brought the scraps left over from my project because, and a smaller base to work on, because I kind of want to, did I? Yeah, there they are. I want to make a small little bag to carry inside my bag because bags inside bags are good. So all you do is you take your scraps, you pick one to get started with. This is one of my favorites here. And you want to work in smallish pieces. And you don't have to be really particular because you can just tear it. There we go. And then you're just going to lay it down. You're going to take your needle and thread, and this is done, and I'm using a variegated thread, so I'm not sure how well it's going to show up for you. Switch you over here. Can we see? Yeah, we can. So, and you are just going to use a quilting or a running stitch, as it's called. So that's in and out, like a fish diving through water. And because it's intended to be rough, it's intended to be almost primitive, you don't have to be as concerned about stitch length, about how close together your stitches are. When you get to the edge of that piece of fabric, you just pick a different one. It can be a similar size, it can be a different size, because what we're going to be doing is going back and forth and just nailing all these guys down. So I like this one, he's pretty. And I'm going to overlap that. And I am just going to carry on with my running stitch. This is the same sort of stitch that we would use if we were hand quilting, because in a sense, that's exactly what we're doing. I find this to be, I find it relaxing. Something about that thread moving through the fabric. Now, of course, you can be, and I have another project. This would be a good project for kids. You're right, Patty. This certainly would. And feel free to work with the kids. You may, if they're young, you may want to work with a bigger needle. So then you might choose to use a slightly heavier thread or a more loosely woven base fabric. But yeah, it would be great for kids. And it's a good way to get them used to the feel of a needle and stitching. You don't have to go straight. You could outline all of these pieces. You could cover this whole base fabric with your scraps, and then choose a particular image out of a piece of fabric, maybe a flower or an animal that you like, and you can simply very roughly hand stitch that, applique it down to the center. And I'm finding in some of the research that I'm doing, I'm paying attention to the bags that I see people carrying here in the store. And these soft fabric bags, I'm starting to see these everywhere. In fact, I think it was the first day that I actually used this bag that I made, and I happened to have a doctor's appointment, so I'm sitting in the waiting room because they actually let you in now, and another patient arrived, a young girl, and what is she carrying but a soft, squashy cloth bag. Now, it wasn't done with this technique, and don't think she made it. It actually looked like one that she had purchased. But I'm going, whoa, I'm actually in style. So, yeah, I needed to do this. I've just been teaching all afternoon our Aunt Annie's quilt, which is something we started, well, this is month 6. And it's a mystery quilt. There's a mystery novel attached. So if you haven't heard of it, every month you get a segment of the story and instructions for one block. And you would end up with 12 blocks, 12-inch blocks that you can set however you like, and a full novel that you can then reread. So if you're interested in something like that, all of the classes and all of the information has been recorded. It's not too late to jump in. So you can see how I'm just building up the fabrics as I taught. This is something that you can do while you sit and you watch TV, you play a little. It's okay if you're interrupted. It's okay if you put it down, you go have a snack, you make supper, you go back to it. I'm intrigued to give this Boro Boro process a little bit more explanation, just to sort of see how far I can push it. These projects I've done so far have been pretty traditional, but you don't have to stay with that. You don't have to stay with doing things the old way just because that's how it was always done. You could take the technique and run with it. I've seen pictures online of projects like this that are done in totally different colors. I think what makes the project different, what makes it Boro, is the hand stitching, and it kind of gives a tactile sense to the project that sometimes our machine made things don't have. It's human. The fact that it can take you a while to do is part of the benefit. When you handle something, think of things that actually we had to do that back at art school. Think of things that you handle on a daily basis, and think of how much of yourself is kind of worked into that object. It can be a very utilitarian object like a toothbrush, but it becomes so intimately connected to you that it takes part of you with it if you lose it. It's not about the value of things. emotions. It's about putting ourselves into it. So now you can see I got to the end, I turned around. I'm making my rows of stitching about a half an inch apart. But you can, as I say, you could take this and decide to stitch around in a spiral and then carry on with that. And once you have your fabric prepared, then you can decide what you're going to do with it. I know when I was creating my bag, I just made a couple of nice big pieces of quilted fabric, and then I got out my bag pattern, laid it on the quilt batting side, and took my marker and drew around it. Because all of these are raw edges, I didn't, and the thread that is used to quilt it, those are big stitches. The other name you'll discover online if you're exploring this is called big stitch quilting. I didn't want those threads pulling out when I cut out the shape of the bag. So I laid my pattern out, drew around it, and then I stitched on that line with a really nice short machine stitch, just to secure those threads. I could have been truly authentic and hand stitched everything, but I'm not quite there yet. So the bag itself was constructed with the machine. So then I had my bag pieces, sewed them together, sewed the lining, and put the bag together following the instructions in the pattern. The only thing I might suggest is just to kind of keep with the feeling of it, is to choose a bag pattern that is fairly simple, doesn't have a lot of zippers and pockets and that sort of thing, because you want your work to show. So get something that's soft, squashy, maybe has a flap that goes over. Let's see what we've got out here. That's, something like this guy. That might be a fun first project. Even just a simple something like this guy here. You can look past the piecing on some of these patterns. You can see how this great tote bag right there. And then we have, this is a laptop keeper. So because this is so nice and soft, that will be an ideal project. It's a good size to start with, and it is functional. So keep your bags fairly simple until you get a hang of the technique. Enjoy it, have fun, use up your scraps. Trust me, there will be more scraps. They multiply. If you leave them in bins too long, especially those scraps, boy, they get busy and they just make more and more and more scraps. Okay, I think I've talked long enough. So that's it for today. Enjoy a new project, have fun, pack it up in a bag and take it with you to the park and sit on a bench and stitch and see how many stop by to see what you're up to. Until then, take care. Hopefully we get through this hot, smoky spell and we can enjoy some outside weather this summer before winter closes in on us again. So until then, remember to stay kind, stay calm, stay safe, everybody, and we will talk to you next time. Bye.